We'll go on then to our next public hearing, which is a proposed amendment to Title IV, Chapter 11, the definition of family and group daycare facilities. That will also be presented by Mike Ray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Before you tonight is an amendment to the zoning code to reduce the number of children for a family daycare to 5 and reduce the number of children for a group daycare to 6. This amendment is to make the daycare definitions within city daycare ordinance, zoning code, and building code consistent with each other. This is the language as it currently exists. Basically, the zoning code defines 4 classifications of daycare facilities: family, group, small, large. Family daycare is defined as a daycare facility providing daycare for 6 or fewer children. Group is 7 to 12 children. Small is 13 to 20. And large is 21 or over. Fairly simple amendments. Family is being reduced to 5 or fewer children, and group daycare facility is being reduced to 6 to 12 children. And this is just to make it consistent with the current city daycare ordinance. It'll make it consistent with those numbers. That's essentially what it's accomplishing. And it also make it consistent with the International Building Code, which defines certain occupancies by the amount of children. R3 occupancy would be 5 or fewer, and an E occupancy would be 6 or more. So the distinction between those occupancies is certain ADA requirements within the building code. With that, I'd like to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, Dan.
Just one question, and I don't know if it counts in this or if it goes to the actual ordinance, and so this question may be for another time. Do the provider's children count against the number? And does that count for this, or is that more of a...
That might be a question for our city attorney, and so we'll defer to Randy.
Right now, yes. Proposed, no.
Okay.
Tom?
I was just a little bit confused about the number of kids. I have a memory that when we passed the ordinance at the end of last year, we shifted it to the number 4 and from 6, but now we're saying 6 down to 5, so I feel like I've missed something. Is that, now we were talking about, in that particular case, when we went from 6 to 4, we were talking about the licensing aspect of the provider, and so in terms of definitions, I feel like we're still at odds, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, the only comment I was going to make is that change was made because the state changed their regulations and mandated that anyone who had 4 or more children in daycare had to be licensed at least under the state or regulated by the state. Yeah.
So it's a different issue, different numbers, different issue.
Yeah, these are just our definitions of types of daycare.
Okay. Okay. It's a little bit like playing basketball and somebody going like this and like that. It's
just the definition.
I was never very good at basketball, but sorry. I'm just confused.
So, Mike, did you have a response
These
to
are
that
just
as
the
well?
definitions within the zoning code, which refer to certain performance standards for daycares.
Right.
And we're just trying to make them consistent with what we currently have for the city's daycare ordinance.
And the numbers that we are the words that we have up there: family, group, small, and large. They could be A, B, C, D, or orange, blue, green, red. I mean, they're just for. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Walter?
Again, a question for staff. We're currently inviting or have advertised, I believe, a public meeting for providers and others to come and talk to us about some of the changes that we made the end of last year that Tom referred to. My understanding is that what's before us right now is only, as Mike said, just to align the zoning code with other city ordinances.
Was that the meeting
If
that...
Tom,
Pardon me, Walter, go ahead.
if Tom is correct that at the end of last year, we talked about 4 or more, and then we're getting into children of the family doing the providing, can we be assured at some point in the next several months, all of this will come together so that it aligns with itself and a person reading it can actually understand what it says? That is a question.
So, first, didn't we just have that meeting last week? Was it Friday? Thursday or Friday last week? Okay.
Yeah, we've already met with, well, we advertised and we're available for people to come and comment or ask questions. 3 members of the press and 1 person from the Health and Welfare came. So we haven't gotten any input other than that, except for someone suggesting that they might write us an email. But the Health and Welfare did have, as a long answer to your question, the Health and Welfare did have some changes, and you'll see those proposals. As far as assurance about what happens to the city code, that's up to the council. But the proposals will help the council consider how to approach daycare as it wishes. This tonight simply makes the definitions of the sizes of daycare consistent with that which is already in the daycare ordinance, and there won't be a proposal from staff to make any further changes on that because they're just placeholders. And the reason that 6 was the number that we chose was, as Mike said, the International Building Code already requires 6 occupancies to have a different character and regulation than those below 6.
Thank you, Randy. Council have questions, other questions of Mike or other staff members. Walter?
Following up on Randy's comment, I would personally urge the council to see if, when this is all said and done, if we can't bring it all together so that it makes consistent sense throughout in terms of numbers and the way all of the different zoning, city code, et cetera, and state code all relate to each other. I'm pretty well lost.
Okay. Sue?
Well, I kind of my understanding is this is apples and oranges. Whether or not we change our daycare ordinance to require first aid or CPR or whatever for however many kids, that doesn't change the International Building Code requirement for however many 6 children there are. Whether we say you need CPR or not, the building code requires certain modifications, like for ADA.
Sure. The state
Okay.
legislation would have to be changed. The state building code would have to be changed in order to amend that.
Right. So whether or not we require a license or a registration has nothing to do with whether the bathroom needs to be ADA compliant. That's what I'm seeing here. This is more zoning code as opposed to other requirements.
Okay.
Is
Are
that
there
all?
other questions or clarifications before we open the public hearing? Yes, Tom?
Just to be clear, I think it's clear, but not completely. By daycare, we mean daycare for children, not adult daycare, say like Gritman's adult daycare. So this is really child care facilities for children that may or may not be during the day. It may be nighttime child care, right? I mean, but we say daycare, even though we're referring to child care. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I think that is an important
Yeah, I
clarification
just
for
wanna be
everybody here, anybody
trying
who
to-
may want to testify. Yes, Randy?
Daycare is defined in our code as for children.
Okay, yeah, it's in the definition.
There is one little thing that I need to clarify. There may be a change that I'm going to suggest as soon as I can find these supplementary regulations. If you'll notice in your, notice in the proposal at 5, it refers to above classifications A through D. It probably should say 1 through 4, and that's but I need to find it in the code so I can verify that that's in fact correct. Maybe Mike can help me with that.
Whether those are numbers or letters?
Yeah, it's probably been changed when we reorganized the definitions, and that just wasn't caught. It's probably been like that for a while.
That would be in the definition section, Randy.
Yeah,
at the-
411.9.
We'll just wait for that clarification before opening the
Just take me a
public hearing.
second.
Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
Oh,
Yeah, yes, so my suggestion is that, before you open the public hearing, that you also consider change where at number 5, which is on your page 2 of 2, where it says the number of children in each of the above classifications, parentheses, it should say 1 through 4, or 1 to 4. I guess 1 through 4,
Through 4,
yeah,
okay.
instead of A to D.
Everybody see where that is? Okay. Okay, Tom?
I'm assuming that this would also apply to businesses in the city of Moscow that choose to have as a benefit for their employees a place for kids to be during the day. So let's say on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there are 2 children that are in daycare, and on Tuesday and Thursday, there are 7. So how does that work? If it's a variable kind of thing?
Average daily kids?
Randy?
I want to be careful as I say this, but that's really not related. The function of daycare is really not related to the changes that are proposed here regarding the definition of the sizes of daycare. That is addressed in the daycare ordinance, but not here. This relates to uses and occupancies within zoning districts, and doesn't relate to the function on a day-to-day basis of daycare or the detail of the provision of daycare within the city.
Okay.
And so that will be addressed, and we can address it at another time, but for purposes of the zoning code, this is really just definitional so that the uses that are related to zoning districts in the city can be addressed in a consistent way with the way we regulate the functions of daycare in the daycare ordinance.
So if I may follow up?
Sure, go ahead.
So would that mean that the example that I just gave, where there are 2 kids on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and 3 kids on Tuesdays and Thursday, that they would fall under the group daycare as opposed to the family daycare because you default to the larger for the purpose of zoning code? Or?
It would really just be defined under the daycare ordinance. And Kelly would give us the number of the total amount of kids after she determines that.
Oh, okay.
And then basically all the zoning code contains is performance standards which relate to daycares. So we have certain requirements, for instance, group small and large daycares where you have a loading zone. Some require 1 spot, some require 2. Most of all the daycares require loading zones where you don't have reverse movements, so you can just pull through. Others, performance standards relate to off-street parking requirements. And then yet another performance standard would relate to site-proof fencing. And basically that's all we have under the zoning code, is just which zoning districts allow conditional use permits for certain daycares, which zoning districts these are allowed by right. And then we just have those additional performance standards on top of that. But basically, the administration department tells us what type of daycare it is from the applicant, and then based upon the information that Randy and Kelly are able to review.
Walter?
Thank you, ma'am. Randy, another question, please, regarding your comment about this applies to children. The definition in the proposed ordinance, which also seems to have the wrong year on it, I just noticed, B27, daycare facility, says any business, place of business, or establishment which provides daycare. Now, that in and of itself, in my non-legal opinion, sounds like it could include the Gritman adult daycare operation, whatever they call it. I looked further down in B27A3, and it excludes any medical or hospital facility operated pursuant to license issued by the state of Idaho. Now, whether or not that takes out the Gritman operation, I don't know, but are we...
Well, if I might,
And I know we're just trying to straighten up a little bit of housekeeping on a zoning code, but all these questions keep coming up. Yes, sir.
Sounds like Mike has a response. And
if you notice the definitions, we say a daycare facility providing daycare for 5 or fewer children. So we include children at the end of each of those.
I saw that, but I'm back at the definition, which is any business, place of business, or establishment which provides daycare.
Okay. Randy?
Period.
It says here that daycare facility doesn't include the hospital, if that's your question.
I was asking, does that exclude it?
Yes.
Okay.
The facility, yes. It doesn't have a separate daycare definition in the zoning code. Daycare is defined, daycare for purposes of the function of the business of providing direct supervision and care of children is defined in the daycare ordinance. And whether this is a satisfactory answer to you all or not, because this is in the flux and because this was a cleanup based upon our city code before there was a decision made by the administrative committee to direct staff to provide more suggestions for changes in the daycare ordinance, this is trailing the changes that the council made before the first of the year. What you'll see, if there are further changes made by the council in the daycare ordinance, is cleanup of this section behind that. But there are two different processes. The Local Land Use Planning Act requires planning and zoning public hearing and a suggestion made to council and a hearing before council, and the daycare ordinance does not. So this has a different track and it's slower.
Okay.
So we can't fix everything tonight. What I would ask you to do is consider what you have before you and make whatever decision you wish, and then staff will react to that. But this will not impede any changes that will be suggested by staff next week, next Monday. And then when we need to change some things, because there are some things that, if depending on what council does, may need to be cleaned up in this definition.
Gary, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah. Stephanie just pulled up on the our code section, that code section 10.3b, which was not, or 10, yeah, definitional 10.3b, which wasn't included as being amended, defines daycare as direct care and supervision of children provided for compensation. So it is defined within the code. You just don't have the entire code in front of you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dan?
So, I guess for staff again, would we be better to consider this on 3 separate readings and maybe postpone a decision on this part until after, so we're not doing multiple cleanups on this section of the code?
My suggestion is no, because this has a process that in part is determined because of the public hearing that's noticed at the Planning and Zoning Commission and then comes forward here. To me, the most efficient way for council to act would be to decide on this rather than to hold that decision.
Okay.
And then let us, because of the city council doesn't change anything that's proposed next Monday,
Then you're done.
There wouldn't have been a reason to delay this. So that's really up to council. You can do it on 3 readings if you'd like, but if you feel comfortable with this, I'd just get it done, and we'll come in behind it with whatever needs to be done, depending on what the council does. And we don't know what that is yet.
Okay.
Any other questions or clarifications before opening the public hearing? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Hearing none, then, we'll open the public hearing and first invite testimony in support of the proposed legislative code amendments pertaining to daycare. As before, I'll invite those testifying to come forward. State your name and address for our record. Is there testimony in opposition or general testimony? Okay, seeing no one come forward, then I'll close the public hearing and open up to the council for its deliberation. Tim?
Madam Mayor, I would propose that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 in separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay. And is there any discussion of that before voting? Yes, Wayne?
I've been going to ask this question, and I've been hesitating to ask this because this has gotten to the point that it's taken on its own life. This has become so complicated. I'm really worried that we're going to have to put on a full-time staff member just to handle this. But my question is this.
You weren't going to talk to
We lowered the number from 6 to 5 as opposed to raising in the
other 2 ordinances.
In the other 2 from 5 to 6. Why did we come down as opposed to going up?
We really changed this mostly because the building code kicks in at 6, and it makes more sense for a group daycare to start at 6. It doesn't really have anything to do with who's required to get a license. Right now, anyone with 4 or more children is required to get a license, and we have, changes that are proposed to that, but it won't make any difference as far as these definitions are concerned.
Thank you.
If I may, it's just the interface between the building code, the daycare code, and the zoning code. So this is just another one of those cleanups.
Just for clarification of the mover and the seconder, we had that clarification, that correction that Randy suggested on page 2 of 2, and I want to make sure that that was acceptable to you. Under definitions, item 5, that pertain to changing the parenthetical phrase about A to D to 1 through 4.
The maker of the motion accepts that proposal by the city attorney.
Okay. And the second?
I'm fine with it, too.
Yep, okay. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Okay. We'll start this roll call vote with you, Walter.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries, and so we have ordinance number 2010-09, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, Municipal Corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 11, Section 9, to conform the definition of daycare facility to recent changes in the city's daycare ordinance, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law.